Hi, this is Catlin, and I want to do a quick overview of how I take the curriculum that I have with StudySync and look at it through the lens of a whole group rotation. And when I say whole group rotation, I don't mean just starting with students and doing, your teacher thing first and then kind of putting them on the computer. But how are we really weaving together the online and offline elements so it's an engaging and hopefully really exciting lesson for students? So I'm in my StudySync account. I'm in my empathy unit. I'm going to click into my instructional path and select To Kill a Mockingbird, one of my favorite books of all time. And typically when I am looking at a text in my instructional path, I'll get into the preview because I just want to see what are my students going to see when I assign this. So this is a first read assignment, and all first reads share some similar qualities, components, elements, right? So they all have an introduction with a little blurb about the text, and then the kids can watch a preview video. There's the read section where they can read, they can listen to the audio, so the story being read to them. They can annotate as they read. This first read also has a SyncTV episode, which is an episode where a group of teenagers are sitting in a kind of a circle or at a desk, and they're having a conversation, a very high-level conversation about this text. They are definitely modeling best practices in this text. And then we have the think questions, which are the questions that are really going to drive students back to the text for textual evidence to support their analysis as they answer these questions. So once I've previewed it and I get a sense of what's there, I can even check out the teacher edition and what's kind of behind the scenes. I can go into a PDF of the lesson plan, or I can take a peek at the teacher edition here and see what has the StudySync team put in place to support me as I teach this lesson. So for example, as I'm going through, you'll see there's an access prior knowledge activity. There is the read section. So as kids read, they're going to be reading and annotating and making vocabulary predictions. And they even have a lot of language in here to support me if I'm going to do some explicit instruction on how you make vocabulary predictions using the context clues in the text. There are also discussion questions built in. There's a reading strategy I can focus on for every text. So really, when I look at this teacher edition section, I'm trying to figure out what do my students need right now and pick and choose the pieces I really want to focus on and dive deep into as we explore this lesson. So I tend to make very sloppy notes as I lesson plan, so I'm going to lift the hood on that process. So as I'm looking at that StudySync lesson, this is how I would tackle it as a whole group rotation, so that we're really rotating in a dynamic way between the offline experiences where kids can look at each other and have conversations, and the offline or the online experiences where they're engaging with the digital text and the other elements of the StudySync lesson. So in this example, I have us starting offline together, actually in collaborative small groups, completing the access prior knowledge activity. From there, I'm going to project that video preview of To Kill a Mockingbird, and I'm going to play it for the class and then debrief. What did you guys notice about the video? What do you expect about the text now that you've seen it? What questions do you have? Once we've had a quick debrief about the preview, then we're going to shift online. And individual students are going to log into their StudySync account. They're going to pull up the text, which I've assigned to them, and they are going to read, annotate, and make those vocabulary predictions. While students are working online, I'm freed up. And during that time, you'll see a little T that stands for Tucker. I am going to pull students who are like my lower level struggling readers who might need a little extra attention, a little extra support when it comes to close reading strategies. So I will pull individual or maybe a small group of kids who would benefit from tackling the text with me and going through some close read strategies to help them be successful as they read. Once we've had some time for kids to read and annotate and make their predictions, then we all go offline. all computers close, and I'm going to project that SyncTV episode where we have this small group of teenagers talking about this excerpt from To Kill a Mockingbird. And the first few times my students see these discussions, they're kind of blown away. They feel a little bit like the discussions are out of reach because these kids are modeling best discussion practices. So what I have them do is watch the video, take a sheet of paper and fold it in half. And they basically make a 2-column chart that looks like this. And on the one side, on the left side, they're just making notes about the text. As they're listening to students talk about To Kill a Mockingbird, what are they learning from this conversation? What's really interesting? What's kind of confusing? I want them to note those things in that left side column. Then in the right-hand side, I want them noting any of the discussion strategies that they're seeing the students in the discussion employ that seem to be driving that discussion forward. So are they leaning in? Are they asking follow-up questions? How are they really driving this conversation? Then, once we've watched a section, we might not watch the whole thing, but once we watch a section of the SyncTV episode and they've had a chance to kind of fill in some of that 2-column chart, then we actually go to another offline activity where students sit in small groups in each of the 4 corners of my classroom. I call it 4-corner conversation. And they take their 2-sided column sheet and I give them the list of discussion questions straight from the lesson plan. And they have a 10-minute conversation. And the goal of that conversation is definitely to, 1, talk about the discussion questions, but 2, can you employ 1, 2, 3 of those discussion strategies that you noticed the kids in the video using? And what's so fascinating as a teacher is in the beginning of the year, they're not very good at having discussions, but as the year continues, they get much, much better. I would say by January, it maybe isn't a SyncTV episode level, but they are employing consistently the strategies that they're seeing from those episodes, which is incredible. And then the last part of this whole group rotation lesson is the students going back online and answering the think questions that are part of the lesson. And now, if you're wondering what happens to those kiddos who I pulled during the first online section, I might make accommodations for them. Maybe they only answer 1 or 2 think questions instead of all of them. I don't want to have that time where we work together be a penalty for them. So I just figure out what's going to make sense for those kids if we did some individual work together and they didn't have quite as much time to read as the rest of the class. So I hope that gives you guys an idea of how to take an online curriculum that's very much written kind of in a whole group format and start to think about how do we weave these pieces together so it's not just me talking and then kids go online, but it's really this fluid movement between the parts of the lesson that might be online and offline. So below this video, I will make sure that I include a link to this template and the SyncTV 2-column chart in case those might be helpful for teachers using StudySync who are intrigued by the whole group rotation lesson.